Hi everyone, I'm Tom, an intern at Banter, and I'm joined here today by the founders of Hollo, a mental health organization that aims to make mental health care more accessible for people using AI and deep tech. So we're joined by Cameron and Ajit, and today we're going to be talking about mental health and body image, particularly how it relates to men.
I'm Ajit. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Hollo. And at Hollo, we try to make sure that people who need the help can get it as best as they can. And how it relates to male mental health is that we help them understand their feelings and hopefully just try to be more open in general. And that's our mission anyway. Cameron?
My name is Cameron. So I'm a biotechnology graduate, but I started Hollo back in 2018, and back then it was kind of just a therapy network connecting to therapists, but then we realized there's a lot of opportunity and gaps in the usability of tech in the space, and so that's when we started to figure out that we could actually do something, see whether we can actually bring some impact to people's lives.
That's awesome. I'd like to hear a little bit about your mental health story and journey. Like, how did you guys come to start learning about mental health, and what are some things you've learned along the way?
I started this journey with Cameron, but it wasn't my first exposure to mental health. I was intrigued at the idea that we could do something for mental health when Cameron met me. And before that, I'd already started thinking about mental health because it's just so crucial to many aspects of our lives and many encounters we go through. And there's always, at some level, mental health is always playing a part. I've been thinking about it for like 3-4 years now at least, and I've had friends go through episodes and having to understand what they're going through, and then also what I'm going through. It took a while, but I think we're finally at a place where we can make some impact.
Yeah, so I guess more of a personal mental health story for me. I grew up being super depressed from like 12, 13 onwards, having like existential crises, and I eventually figured out that I was something that people call philosophically depressed, which is more on the like meaningfulness of life and like the goals and what it even means to be around, right? On top of that, just being an awkward teenager, growing up and being like that fat kid in high school, a lot of like body image issues roll into that, right? And so being like a nerdy academic that sometimes played sport but then was still fat and like in the Asian culture, being super like toned or skinny, it was more like aspirational, and kind of that whole environment creates like a kind of like a pressure cooker sort of moment, and that's definitely more of my personal experience with it. But then after getting to university, I like started seeking out more professional help and started to understand my own feelings and my own thoughts about things, and was just a bit more open in regards to sharing about it, and hoping by being open myself, it would help others try to be more outspoken or at least think about their own feelings.
So why did that make you want to start Hollo? Like, how did that journey make you be like, oh, I'm not just going to be someone who's learning about mental health, who's learning about how to understand my own feelings. I really want to start something.
Back then, I realized that I wasn't the only one going through something. And at the time, it was a social innovation course, and we had to think of an impactful idea. And I think that night, our group was like up till 3 a.m. because the due date was really soon. So all of us were like, wow, this feels like one of those insomnia nights, and like the pressure of academics. And then we realized that high school in Hong Kong is just as bad or even worse. You have 8 courses, you're there majority of your day, and then on top of that you have like your assessments and your exams and the pressure that families put on kids. And no matter whether you're from like an Asian family or not, it is quite intense. And so that really inspired or sparked the idea first, was like, why are people going through a lot of this alone? Why aren't they getting like support? And so that question was the guiding question for us. But then it kind of became a lot more real for me. During that time, my friend in Singapore took his own life, so it was like baffling to me because he was actually, outwardly, he seemed like he was getting better, and then all of a sudden it was like, it's really quick.
Yeah. I think, and for me as well, like I've always been a bit anxious, and it's never been quite like recognized until recently because I did start getting professional help in university as well, like Cameron. I've experienced bullying. I have gone through periods where how I look just isn't fitting the cultural norm, especially more so in HKU because I think my high school was a bit more international, so it didn't seem as off in terms of like my skin color, although my weight was a big issue there because I was in a pretty sporty school and most people there were pretty fit. But then in HKU it was the weight plus my skin color and then just the choices I make on my body, like hair. All that just kind of piles up and you start breaking down. I know I cried. And then you start getting professional help and then you realize that you can do something about it. And I'm from a tech background, so I can actually have an impact from a digital side, which would help make this mental health care more scalable, more available to everyone. That's what I'm trying to bring to the table.
For you guys to get to know me a bit better, like for me, how I started to get into mental health was, I think it was in high school. So like, in high school, like everyone's, especially in the last few years, everyone's thinking, oh shit, what am I going to study at uni? Like, what am I going to do? And I think for me, I was really kind of lost, and like it felt really like, I was like so down, and it was like for 2 years, it was really, really stressful because I kept thinking like, oh, what do I want to study? What am I passionate about? What do I like? And there wasn't really anything I was like super passionate about. And like, it might seem like kind of like an insignificant thing for some people, but I think for me it was like for 2 years I was just constantly thinking, and then that really weighed down on me. And so like kind of like you guys, when I went to uni, I tried counseling for the first time. To be honest, I didn't like really think like I had any mental illnesses or anything like that. But then I read something online, it was quite interesting. It said like, if you think it might help you, then just try it. And so I tried it out, and it was really cool because the counselor was like, they're trained to like be really attentive and caring and listening. So that was my kind of story. So here we're going to talk about some sports. And you went to YMCA. It was a pretty big kind of sports school for you, and you said that was kind of a...
I didn't really fit in with the culture. I mostly just wanted to study. I was a bit of a nerd back then. I loved my books, but a lot of my friends were more on the sporty side, and there was a big emphasis on extracurricular activities. So a lot of us were playing rugby, football, and basketball quite a bit. I had friends that were going to national teams as well, but I wasn't really part of that culture. So for me, it was a bit of like I couldn't get in younger, and I never was particularly interested. And I just saw the gap becoming quite wide between me and them. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just focus on what I'm good at.
Have you guys had any experiences where you felt like, male mental health was kind of overlooked?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I saw a lot of those like male mental health campaigns in like November. I think was one of the biggest ones that's really popular in the rugby scene.
Yeah.
Even though the rest of the year it's super machoistic and like a lot of toxic masculinity goes on, but then that 1 month there's slightly more awake to the idea of mental health. But I think there's a lot of stigma around men sharing their feelings or being like emotionally available, and I think that stems down to like this gender stereotypes that are expected of them, and I'm not sure where it started, but it somehow got to a point where they just don't talk about it at all, and it's like a show of weakness if you do, and I've never really understood that part, but having like a very traditional dad, that was very much the experience growing up, so like learning how to express myself or like how to even like talk about it was one of the biggest like learning curves.
I don't think I learned that skill until I got to university, honestly. I've never really heard about anyone talk about their feelings until university, really. And then I feel like I'm quite lucky. I got a quite open, minded set of friends. We talk about our feelings quite a decent bit. Started opening up, and we're really supportive. We open up quite a lot actually to our friends now. To my friends now, I open up quite a lot. But that wasn't the experience in high school at all.
So very much bro and locker room talk in high school, which is...
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, Because I think, especially in sports, like, but guys in general, like, I was doing some research about male mental health, and it was a lot of like how the traditional cultures about how men are supposed to be, strong and dominant and in control. Like, while these traits are not inherently bad, it's just like when it takes over you and then it makes you feel like when you do have a problem, when you do have something you feel like you can't solve on your own, you're just thinking like, man up. Yeah, that can be really problematic. And you can see it in sports. Like, I think I was reading a interview with a mental health like director at the NBA. It's like a players association at the NBA, the basketball. And he said something like, men haven't been given the opportunity or chance to be vulnerable. And it was like, yeah, I can kind of see that. I feel like there's a really fine line. There's a fine line between, when you're doing sports, like if there's a problem, you can, power through, try and solve it. You can do it.
I think a lot of those values of like toughening up or like you get injured, just like walk through it or walk it off. A lot of that, I think, at its core as a value is fine. It might be slightly toxic in the sports environment, especially around like injury. But once it starts to get tied to gender, then I think a lot of that starts to become much more problematic because then the expectation becomes on men. But then a lot of the women in sport are just as tough, just as resilient. But it's odd because this level of expectation becomes like a quality assurance for men's sport. And when women participate in sport, then it becomes like a lot less valuable because they're less sought after or less tough or less skilled at what they're doing. And I think it ties into a lot of that culture around gender in sport.
Actually, talking about gender in sport reminds me of Quidditch. So I did used to play. It's the only sport that has both men and female playing in the same court. And there, what happened was that there was a bias towards men, even though the point was that we were supposed to have both genders on the court. There was still a bias, and we were trying to have to meet the minimum requirement for females, which I think are 2, and then everyone else is just as strong as they can get, basically, to make sure that they win. That was the point. But even then, it's just like it comes across as like we having to do more. But in the sport, you're equally as capable, really, and there's different tactics you can use to bypass. And the sport is meant to be played in a multi-gendered approach.
So it's like kind of like, even though it's meant for both genders, women are kind of like, they're kind of looked down on.
Yeah, and it doesn't come across as good for anyone.
Yeah.
Either side doesn't benefit from this.
I want to bring up an HKU study that was recent. I think it was August of 2020. I'm not sure. It said 74% of Hong Kong residents showed moderate to high depressive symptoms in August of 2020. And yeah, it's due to long social unrest and as well as COVID. And it's just like, it makes me think about like, especially in Hong Kong, like, where there are, I think our generation is changing a lot, the mental health kind of situation, but especially in the older generation, there are lots of like traditional Asian beliefs. Like, I had a friend, I talked to him, and he just says that his family, like, they just don't talk about their feelings, like, ever.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I think like a lot of the Asian culture around it is generally like super closed off. I'm from a mixed background, so my mom is from Hong Kong, my dad's South African, so like somehow they both ended up being super traditional and super like shut down about feelings and emotions. But I think my mom's made a lot of strides in that area. But I mean, like Asian culture in like sharing feelings or talking about things, or like even the simple thing of like saying I love you. I can ask a lot of my like Hong Kong friends, how often do they even say like I love you, or the parents say I love you back to them, right? And it's just that even like a simple show of affection is something that a lot of people don't get. I'd love to read more studies about like why this happens and the culture behind it, but it is like a very sad and impactful thing that's happening because it starts there, but then it like boils down to like after conflict or after like disagreements, then people aren't able to like emotionally reconnect with their family, and that's one of the saddest things when like, people that are supposed to be there for you aren't able to.
For sure, that makes sense. Like, the stuff like I love you and stuff like that, you can say it, it's just a culture, like people here just don't, they might not say it, or they might feel a bit awkward about or shy. But then, like you say, like when it gets to the more serious issues, then it's, it's different, right? Being part of an ethnic minority in Hong Kong, do you ever feel like this affects how you navigate body image and those standards in Hong Kong?
Yeah, actually, I've had to learn to resort to different mediums online to get my self-confidence back up, because quite often I don't see people around me like that look like me.
Oh.
And so I always feel like it's off, and I need that sense of validation, just to feel like, okay, yeah, I am very much how I'm supposed to look. For example, like you can tell I have a lot of facial hair, and I have a lot of body hair. I'm hairy for Indian standards. So that means that even other Indians I look at, they don't relate to me because I have more body hair than even them. And so I have to navigate that process. What I tend to do is I just go to Reddit, go to subreddit for beards, and I just scroll. I'm like, okay, motivation, yes. I can see these people that have bigger beards than even me. I can grow it, and everyone else has been able to do it, and they look just fine. Actually, they look amazing. So I'm like, I can do it too. And that's something that I kind of have to find. And you don't really see like representation here in Hong Kong about Indians. I think recently it's been starting to, but unless you watch Indian movies or you watch that culture and you try to stay engaged with that culture, but you're not really part of it anymore because you live in Hong Kong, it's a bit hard because you get disconnected, and otherwise you don't really have that representation on popular media for a long time. You just go without it for a long time. Yeah,
I think that goes to show, like, with mental health, like everyone struggles with different things. Like you say, body hair and that kind of thing was an insecurity for you. I think, like, I never had that kind of thought process. You can grow a beard, unfortunately. I think your beard looks very nice.
thank you.
For me, it was the kind of school stuff and not being able to figure stuff out. But as it pertains to like body image, like for me, I've always been like a little bit heavier. So, sometimes like I'll put on a shirt and I was like, oh, I don't think it looks that good. And it's like, you feel a bit self-conscious, or like if you go to the beach, and then that kind of thing, right? So.
Taking my shirt off in public was a pretty big event for me. That was a very conscious choice I made. And it took me a while. I was in university as well. That's my first time I probably took my shirt off in public, in like a setting where you're supposed to usually be shirtless, and I just had my shirt on most of the time. I still wasn't comfortable in body weight. That was one of the times I was at a lower body weight. I had worked out before then, and I was feeling quite physically fit, but I wasn't still comfortable with my body weight entirely. But even then I was like, no, you know what, I think I should really just start opening up and just trying to like accept, embrace it. And this is who I am. And then I've recently done it as well, even though I have more body weight now. I've gained back my weight, but regardless, I still took my shirt off. I'm like, I can just accept it, and I'm fine with it. So that matters.
I think in Hong Kong especially, there's definitely like kind of like an ideal body standard, right, for both men and women. I think for men, like the global one is pretty similar. It's pretty similar globally, like kind of muscular. Like you think like, I don't know, I guess a lot of people like Captain America, that kind of thing. Like not too skinny or not too heavy.
You gotta be tall.
Ah, yeah, that's a thing for some people as well.
180.
Yeah. 6 feet. Oh. Glad I'm not standing right now. I don't think it really matters. Something I want to talk about is about sports. Is that because I coach basketball to like little kids. I coach sport to little kids as well, and it's just something that makes me like really sad. Is like, because as a sports coach for young kids, like our number one goal is for them to have fun. It's not to develop any skills, because if they have fun, when they grow older, they'll be open to trying it and keep playing sport because it's fun. But if you make it super hard and you're like, oh, you have to win all the time, then they might not like it and they might not want to do it. And I think something in Hong Kong is that, like,
meritocracy of it gets very intense.
Yeah, and globally as well, is that exercise is seen as like a chore. It's like something, I have to do it. Oh, I want to lose weight. Oh, that means I have to run, and running sucks. And I think it freaking sucks. Like, not running, but like
running sucks.
Yeah, I think running's hard too. But I think it's about like, with sports, like it's about finding something you do fun, like that you enjoy. Like I really like playing basketball. I really like playing volleyball, and I really don't like running, so I don't run.
Yeah.
And you said you played baseball in high school. Like how was that?
It was fun. Actually, I like running though. So
Oh,
you
run quite a bit.
yeah.
Use like apps for it too.
Yeah. So with the right running path and with the right views, it's really fun.
I'd like to talk a little bit about gym culture in Hong Kong and worldwide. Like for guys, like there is a gym culture, and like it's great to be healthy and great to be fit, but it's another thing when that kind of your mental stability or your mental health like kind of hinges on that. And like, what do you guys think?
I think like in Hong Kong or around the world, there's like a really high expectation on male body image to be super buff or super toned, not too big but also not too small or skinny. And so I think a lot of men experience different things. Like for example, the quite skinny guys with high metabolism, they're called like hard gainers, and so they struggle a lot to eat appropriate amounts, and it relates not just into like being in the gym, but what they eat at home and their just day-to-day life, right? And so a lot of people have this like toxic view about their diet, how much calories they're eating, and like the type of food that they're putting in their body. And I think like anything, it's good in moderation, it's good when you're educated about it. But when you start to have a lot of misinformation, a lot of toxic culture around like counting calories or things that are being quote unquote healthy, it becomes unhealthy. Even within the gym itself, I think like just walking around HKU gym, you see a lot like the rowing team like doing a lot of like ego lifting, like trying to outlift each other, and that with improper form just comes with a lot of injury. So I find it kind of silly, but it's like a very like egocentric room filled with testosterone and just like men comparing each other. In reality, it should just be a place where you're training for yourself, for your own healthy body, and kind of like just providing for yourself, right?
I think a lot of people go there for the appearance side of things, which is not wrong, and I'm glad that some people do that. But what it doesn't resolve is that they have some maybe unhealthy thoughts about their own image, body image, and that part can get quite toxic actually if they don't really resolve what they're feeling about their appearance. Otherwise, like if they don't go to gym, that can get quite toxic.
I think the biggest problem with like I'm all for people going to the gym to be more comfortable with your body, to be more healthy and have a balanced life and be more energetic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the problem is when you start to put that expectation on others. And so when it gets lost in translation where, oh, I'm here for my own health and to be fit for myself, it becomes an expectation of, oh, this other person needs to be fit for themselves. And I think that conversation kind of loses its value to a lot of people.
Yeah. What you were saying earlier, I think it's such a shame that, some people, they go to the gym and then it's about their ego. When really, like I've been to some gyms like CrossFit Typhoon, that's a kind of big CrossFit gym in Sangpun. Like the atmosphere is really great. Like people are, they're really encouraging and they're trying to work hard, and a lot of them are really, really fit. Like it's awesome. So, like body image in general is more seen as a woman's issue generally. And one of my female friends, she was talking to me about, I just want to like learn more about like, what's up with that? Like, why does like social media and stuff affect so many females? She sees people like Kendall Jenner, who have like the ideal female body, and then she might compare herself to that, and she's like, oh, I don't look that good, and she might compare herself to her friend group, because her friend group might have, oh, like I find my friends so pretty, and like they all like are really fit and that kind of thing. First, they compare themselves to their friends. They're like, oh, I don't feel good enough, like here, and here. And then the second thing that I found really interesting was they start thinking about how other people see them. So they're like, because I don't exercise enough, or because I'm not really fit, I feel like other people might be thinking that, I don't have control, or I'm not, healthy. She was talking about how social media really doesn't help at all. I think for me, like, it wasn't really something that affected me that much, like growing up, like social media and that kind of thing. What do you guys think about body image being more of like a woman's issue?
I think it's more talked about a lot of the time. And I think the level of male representation in media regarding like body health, body image, or more so like the consumption of that type of media is a lot less. Like on Instagram, I don't follow any male models. I think my most interaction with it is just being in public or watching movies or TV shows where they have like super fit actors and things like that, right? So for me, it's definitely like a more limited availability of it, but I think the impact is very much the same. The comparison to a perceived perfect image, and not being able to attain that themselves. I think what's really empowering for a lot of people is realizing that those same models, have their own body image issues, and there's always going to be some things that we see as humans as imperfect about ourselves. And I think just being in our own bodies 24/7, you get to see every nook and cranny that you're not happy with, right? But I think like I've seen a lot of like empowering videos where people ask someone else to draw a picture about them or to describe them, and like really often the person gets described as like really beautiful, just unique, and like I think that's definitely like the direction a lot of people should go in regards to like body image or beauty, is like understanding people are just unique and accept.
For sure. I also think like, when it comes to ourselves, we often think about things that other people are just not thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're looking at things, oh, like, this is not good enough, this is inadequate. But then other people, they see different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had a great time speaking to you guys today.
Me too.
Awesome.
Same here.
So thank you for your time and like coming to talk to us, and I thought it was cool to talk about mental health and body image with you guys.
I'm glad this was a safe space to share as well. So I felt quite open here.
Thank you for sharing your experiences too.
Yeah.